Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into the classic journey of Finn the human, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. There once was a boy with a big heart, a bright yellow backpack, and a dream tucked deep inside his chest. His name was Finn, and though his world was full of talking candy, cosmic beings, and magical mysteries, his story at its core was beautifully simple. He just wanted to do the right thing. But before the battles and the broken hearts, before kingdoms rose and fell, there was just a little treehouse in the middle of the land of Ooh. Picture it. Wooden floorboards creaking gently under bare feet, a rustling hammock swaying in the breeze, and the soft sounds of an old record player humming in the background. This treehouse wasn't just a place to sleep. It was home. A place where memories grew like vines, and every shelf, every corner, had a story to tell. Finn lived there with his magical best friend and brother, Jake the dog, a stretchy, sleep-jaw, sometimes silly, but always loyal companion. The two of them shared everything: pancakes in the morning, training sessions on the front lawn, dreamy star talks on the roof at night. To the outside world, Finn was a warrior in the making. But within the quiet sanctuary of those leafy walls, he was just a kid who was still learning how to tie bandages, how to swing a sword, how to be brave. And somewhere in that innocence, we start to see the softest layers of his story. You see, Finn didn't remember where he came from. He wasn't born in the land of Ooh like most of the creatures he encountered. He was found, abandoned as a baby, crying in the woods, left in a leaf pile. A tragic image, but one that didn't define him. If anything, it sparked the fire inside him. The fire to protect. To never let anyone else feel alone the way he once had. Adopted by Jake's parents, Joshua and Margaret, Finn was raised in a home where love was loud, meals were warm, and life was full of oddball chaos. He grew up alongside Jake, who, though technically older, acted like an overgrown pup most of the time. And that was the magic of their bond. Brothers not by blood, but by choice. And there's something even stronger about that kind of connection, don't you think? As Finn got older, his sense of justice bloomed like a sword-shaped flower. He started patrolling the grasslands, looking for creatures to rescue and bad guys to bonk on the head. Not for glory, not for treasure, just because it felt right. Because doing the right thing filled up that part of him that still ached from being lost once. His first missions were small, saving sugar people from falling off cliffs or helping a snail cross a muddy path. But to Finn, they were everything. Each tiny quest added a layer to his courage, a polish to his rusty sense of purpose. And every time Jake trotted beside him with that lazy grin, cracking jokes and playing tunes on his viola, the world felt a little safer. There's something calming in that image, isn't there? A boy and his brother, one full of fire, the other full of stretch. Walking through grassy hills under a bubblegum pink sky, their shadows dancing behind them. No need to rush, no need to win. Just two souls moving through the world, one kind act at a time. Sometimes they'd return to the treehouse with scrapes and bruises. Jake would plop down on the couch with a groan, while Finn would rummage for Band-Aids and draw smiley faces on them. Then they'd eat spaghetti straight out of the pot and listen to old tapes of Joshua's warrior stories. The kind of nights where the stars seemed to lean in a little closer. Some nights, for Finn couldn't sleep. He'd lie in bed, arms folded behind his head, eyes wide open as moonlight pooled through the treehouse window. The world outside shimmered quietly, sometimes with fireflies, sometimes with magic, but always with mystery. He'd whisper questions into the dark. Why am I the only human? Where did I really come from? Am I doing enough? Being enough? They weren't questions a kid should have to carry, but Finn carried them anyway, tucked deep beneath the bright laughter and heroic poses. He never told Jake, not really, but Jake probably knew. Jake always knew more than he let on. To soothe himself, Finn would hum old lullabies, scrappy little tunes he'd made up during bath time or backyard sword fights. He didn't know where the melodies came from, only that they felt ancient and warm, like echoes of a past he couldn't quite remember. And that was Finn's magic, not just in his swordsmanship or his brave leaps into danger, but in the way he held on to hope, even when it hurt, even when he didn't understand the pain. He once told BMO, his tiny, cheerful video game-playing robot roommate, that being a hero wasn't about being strong. It was about showing up, even when you were scared, even when you had no idea what to do next. And then doing the kindest thing you could do. Isn't that a lovely way to look at life? In the daytime, Finn ran through dungeons and dodged slime monsters. But in the quiet hours, he was just a boy learning to live with a big heart in a strange world. His bedroom was messy in the most charming way. Crumbs from late-night sandwiches, broken pencils and crumpled quest maps, a half-drawn doodle of a dragon riding a skateboard. This was the world of a dreamer, a kid still figuring out who he was, but not afraid to try. There was something so pure about Finn in those early years. He wanted to save everyone. The candy folk, the grass villages, even the villains, if he thought they could change. He believed in second chances. He believed that everyone had a little good inside them, somewhere, even if it was hidden under layers of meanness or magic spells. And that belief? It made him powerful in a way no enchanted sword ever could. Sometimes on lazy afternoons, Finn and Jake would climb up to the very top of the treehouse. They'd sit quietly, legs dangling off the ledge, watching the world stretch out in every direction. Candy Kingdom to the south, Ice Kingdom to the north, rolling fields of grass and secrets in between. Jake might drift off mid-sentence, snoring softly. But Finn, he'd stay awake just a little longer, letting the breeze tangle through his hair, thinking. Not sad, just wondering, wishing he could help more, be more, and maybe in a way, thanking the universe for letting him be here at all. There's something deeply comforting about beginnings, isn't there? The early days, the quiet foundations. On when the world is still full of maybes and mysteries, but you feel safe. Like the treehouse will always be there. Like the people you love will always be one hammock away. Of course, we know the world changes. Finn will grow. Things will get harder. But for now, right now, he's just a boy in a treehouse, drawing stars on his ceiling with glow paint, laughing with Jake, hugging BMO, building a pillow fort just because it's Tuesday. That's where we'll leave him for the moment. Soft light, big dreams, a little hero with the whole world ahead of him. Sometimes when the wind rustled through the branches just right, it sounded like whispers. The treehouse was alive in a way. It held memories like rings inside a trunk. Each floorboard creak was a footstep from yesterday. Each window pane shimmered with the light of 100 golden afternoons. Finn didn't think about it much, but even as a kid, he was part of something ancient. The land of Ooh wasn't just a backdrop for his adventures. It was a character of its own, a strange, beautiful world that had seen ages rise and fall. And yet there it was, holding him like a cradle in the leaves. There were mornings when he'd wake to birds singing nonsense songs and Jake cooking bacon pancakes, his tail wagging in rhythm. The scent would fill the house and BMO would play a cheerful tune, bouncing in place. Finn, groggy and grinning, would hop down from his loft, sword tucked under one arm like a teddy bear. No alarms, no quests. Just another day full of possibility. He'd scribble on a napkin. Things to do today. Help someone. Be awesome. Eat sandwich. Then off they'd go, bounding into the world with nothing but courage and an open heart. Finn's childhood was stitched together from these simple moments. Moments that didn't always make the history books, but shaped the boy more than any battle ever could. There was the time he built a robot from trash just to keep BMO company. Or when he taught a gang of rough, tough goblins how to paint watercolor sunsets. Even the days when nothing happened at all, when he and Jake just lay in the grass, watching clouds drift lazily across the candy-colored sky, those days mattered. Because rest is part of the story, too. And for Finn, rest wasn't about doing nothing. It was about being. Being present, being still, being grateful. At night, he'd journal quietly under the covers, flashlight in hand. Today, I helped a tree goblin find his lucky leaf, he might write. Or, Jake and I ate 12 tacos. I feel weird but happy. He didn't know who he was writing for. Maybe future Finn, or maybe some invisible friend he imagined was out there in the stars, watching over him. Someone who'd smile and nod and say, "Good job, kid." And sometimes he wondered if that someone was his real family. That question lingered in him like the last note of a lullaby. Soft, bittersweet, not painful exactly, but always there. He didn't talk about it much. He didn't need to. Because every person he helped, every smile he sparked, brought him a little closer to an answer. Maybe family wasn't about where you came from. Maybe it was about the people who saw you, truly saw you, and stayed. Like Jake, like BMO. Like the oddball heroes and weirdos he'd meet on the road ahead. But for now, in this part of the story, it was just the beginning. The map was still blank in many places. The sky still stretched wide and full of wonder. And Finn, brave and barefoot, stood ready to fill the blank spaces with kindness. One late evening, as the stars blinked lazily into view, Finn sat alone on the treehouse balcony. Auntie Jake was snoring in a sunbeam. BMO was powering down beside a half-finished jigsaw puzzle. The world felt quiet, like the pause between verses in a song. Finn looked out across the horizon and whispered something to himself. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft little vow. I'll protect this place. I'll protect everyone. It was the kind of promise a kid makes when they don't know how big the world really is. But maybe that's the best kind, because it comes from a place of purity, of wonder, of love. He didn't know what was coming. Didn't know about the Lich or the comet or the heartbreaks ahead. All he knew was that his heart was full, his sword was ready, and the wind smelled like adventure. And that was enough. As night settled around the treehouse, the stars above Ooh began their silent waltz across the sky. It was peaceful, but never silent. The world always had something to say if you listened closely. Crickets chirped lullabies in the tall grass. The wind carried the faintest chime of a distant candy festival. And from deep in the woods, the sleepy hoot of a ghost owl echoed like a secret. Finn loved these moments. He didn't always understand them, but he felt them. Like the world was whispering a bedtime story just for him. Like everything was connected in ways too big for words. He would curl into his blanket, limbs tangled from a day of climbing and tumbling and sword swinging, and close his eyes with a smile. Because despite the mystery of it all, despite the questions he carried, the ones about where he came from and who he might one day be, Finn knew he was home. Not the kind of home with family portraits and dinner tables, but a home made of laughter and loyalty. Of friends who knew your weirdest quirks and still chose to stick around. Of silly inside jokes, mid-battle giggles, and soft moments of stillness. The treehouse wasn't just a base or a bedroom. It was the heart of everything. A warm, creaky, leaf-scented haven where imagination had no ceiling and love had no rules. Some nights, Finn dreamed strange dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but flashes of things unfamiliar. A face in a crowd that felt too familiar. A desert sunset. A whisper in a language he didn't know he knew. He'd wake up with his hand on his chest, feeling his heart beat fast. And then he'd smile. Another clue, he'd mumble, before drifting back to sleep. 'Cause that's who Finn was. He wasn't afraid of the unknown. He welcomed it. He let it fold him into its arms like a long-lost friend. As seasons passed, he grew physically, emotionally, even spiritually. The boy who once tripped over his own sword became the young man who could disarm monsters with empathy. But we'll get to all that in time. For now, it's important to hold this version of him. The wide-eyed boy in the treehouse. The hero who was still learning what it meant to be brave, not just in battle, but in love, in loss, in stillness. Because that treehouse wasn't just the beginning of his story, it was the soil that nourished it. Every act of kindness, every laugh with Jake, every evening spent watching the moon rise, it all became part of him, woven into the fabric of who Finn the human would become. So let's pause here, shall we? Close your eyes and picture the warm glow of that treehouse. The windows lit with golden candlelight. Jake's soft snoring coming from the hammock. BMO humming lullabies beside the window. And Finn, our fearless dreamer, wrapped in blankets, one arm draped over his sword, the other resting beneath his cheek. Safe. Content. Wondering what tomorrow would bring. Let that image carry you into sleep if you're heading there tonight. Or into your own dreams if you're listening in the background of your day. Because all great stories begin not with fanfare or fireworks, but with a quiet promise. I will try to be good. I will try to help. I will try to love. And Finn, from that very first day in the treehouse, lived by that promise. So picture this. Finn's just a little older now. Still rocking the bear hat, still leaping into danger without hesitation. But there's something new in the way he walks. A bit more purpose. A few more scuffs on his boots. And maybe, just maybe, a small tug in his chest he doesn't quite know how to name yet. Adventure was no longer just a game, it was becoming a calling. From battling the Ice King on icy mountaintops to unraveling the riddles of ancient dungeons hidden beneath the Candy Kingdom, Finn and Jake were always chasing something. Sometimes it was glory, sometimes it was treasure. But more often than not, they were chasing that feeling, that buzz of doing something right, of standing up even when no one else would. And Finn, he thrived on it. Each quest taught him something new. Not just how to fight or solve puzzles, but how to care, how to read a room, how to lead, even when his voice wavered a little. Because behind the goofy shouts and high-flying punches, Finn had a heart that cracked open wider with every passing day. And then came Bubblegum. Ah, Princess Bubblegum. Smart, cool, kind of intimidating. The way she moved through a room like she already knew what you were about to say. The way her eyes sparkled when she was building something brilliant. It hit Finn like a thunderbolt made of bubble wrap and peppermint. He didn't even know what to do with the feelings. It was all elbows and stammers and sweaty palms. He'd tried to impress her by being extra heroic, leaping higher, fighting harder. He once wrote her a poem, but burned it in the fireplace before she could see it. Jake, of course, teased him endlessly. Just tell her you like her, man. What's the worst that could happen? But Finn wasn't sure he even had the words. How do you explain to someone that your heart does somersaults when they smile? So he said nothing. Or at least, not enough. But that's the thing about first loves. They don't always need big declarations. Sometimes they're just quiet truths tucked behind every glance, every awkward silence. And sometimes the silence says more than any sword ever could. One day, during a particularly wild quest involving lava wolves and a rogue pie elemental, Finn and Bubblegum got separated from the others. They found themselves holed up in a crystal cave, waiting out a storm of magical fireflies. And there, in the shimmering blue light, they talked. Not about dungeons. Not about saving the day. They talked about stars, about dreams, about what it meant to care so much for so many people, and still feel alone sometimes. Finn didn't try to be anyone else. He just was. And Bubblegum didn't solve any equations or give any speeches. She just listened and smiled. For a moment, everything slowed down. And Finn realized maybe love wasn't always about the chase. Maybe it was about the quiet, the calm, the way someone could make you feel like you belonged, even in a world full of monsters and magic. Of course, things didn't stay simple. They never do. There were misunderstandings, hurt feelings, times when Finn's heart swelled too big for his chest, and other times when it felt like it had caved in completely. But that's the journey, isn't it? You learn that love isn't always a straight line. That sometimes the person you adore might not feel the same way, and that's okay. It doesn't make the love any less real. It just makes it part of your growth. Finn learned to let go with grace, to take his pain and shape it into strength, to love without needing anything in return. That's not something many heroes can say. Sometimes love came in quieter packages. Enter Flame Princess. Where Bubblegum was composed and calculated, Flame Princess was wildfire and raw feeling. She didn't hide behind formulas or diplomacy. She burned bright, felt everything deeply, and wore her heart on her blazing sleeve. When Finn met her, something shifted. Not just in the way he saw love, but in the way he saw himself. She wasn't what he expected. She challenged him. Lit up parts of him that had been dimmed by disappointment and confusion. With Flame Princess, Finn didn't feel like a knight trying to win over royalty. He felt seen. And in that whirlwind of first kisses and emotional explosions, sometimes literal explosions, Finn learned that love could be passionate, but also volatile. That caring deeply doesn't always mean things will be easy. And that even the purest feelings can hurt if you're not ready to understand them. They tried. He tried. But between their emotional growing pains and the elemental chaos that came with being made of fire, things got complicated. There were mistakes. Moments Finn wasn't proud of. He hurt her, accidentally, but still. And he had to live with that. Not just because he lost someone special, but because it forced him to look inward, to ask himself what kind of person, what kind of partner he really wanted to be. And that question? It lingered longer than any heartbreak. But it wasn't all ache and ashes. Some of Finn's best days were spent riding across the land of Ooh with Jake, meeting oddball creatures, laughing until his cheeks hurt. There was a magic in that middle space, between the big battles and the quiet heartaches, the simple thrill of living. He'd help a lost mountain find its purpose, dance with sentient slime at underground raves, have noodle fights in treehouse kitchens, and long conversations about whether burritos were truly the perfect food. These moments didn't always make headlines. They weren't epic quests or grand declarations of love, but they were just as important. Because they reminded Finn that being a hero wasn't just about saving kingdoms. It was about showing up, being kind, listening, making people laugh, and sometimes just being there when someone needed you. There was a day, an ordinary Tuesday actually, when Finn and Jake stumbled upon a tiny village plagued by a fear spell. People there hadn't left their homes in years, trapped not by monsters but by their own minds. Finn didn't fight his way through it. He didn't swing a sword or cast a spell. He just listened. Sat with a little old man trembling on his porch and said, "It's okay to be scared. I get scared too." That was it. That was the moment the fear started to unravel. Because Finn didn't need to be fearless. He just needed to be honest. And the world, in return, softened for him. As he moved through these chapters of life, of growing pains and spontaneous dances, of lost crushes and hard lessons, Finn's heart kept expanding. Not in a fairy tale way, but in a real way. He learned that you can love someone and still let them go. That you can be brave without always being right. That people are complicated and messy and full of contradictions. And that's okay. It's what makes life beautiful. It's what makes us beautiful. As Finn kept growing, inside and out, there was a moment when everything around him seemed to change, even though it looked the same. The treehouse was still there. Jake still made bacon pancakes on slow mornings. The land of Ooh still buzzed with magic and mischief. But something in Finn's chest felt heavier and a little quieter. He began to notice things he hadn't before, like the way people changed when no one was watching, the sadness hidden behind smiles, the quiet fear of being left behind. He saw it in Marceline when she played her bass alone at dusk, plucking at memories too painful to name. He saw it in Bubblegum, still regal, still sharp, but tired in ways even her lab coats couldn't fix. And Finn felt it in himself. The ache of growing up. That strange in-between where you're not quite a kid anymore, but not fully sure what comes next. There was a quest once just outside the grasslands. A simple one, or so it seemed. A lost child, a map, a hidden cave. But halfway through, Finn realized the child wasn't lost at all. He'd run away. From expectations, from pressure, from the fear of disappointing the ones he loved. Finn sat with the boy under a starlit sky. They didn't talk much, just stared upward as fireflies danced quietly through the trees. Then the boy asked, "Do you ever feel like you're supposed to be something great, but you're not sure you even want to be. And Finn, older now, wiser in ways that didn't always show, said softly, "All the time." That moment stuck with him, because it reminded him that being a hero isn't just about answering the call to adventure. It's about understanding why you're answering it, and who you're doing it for. His relationship with the Flame Princess had ended, and not on the neatest of terms. There was sadness, yes, but also relief, because both of them had started to change, and change doesn't always mean you stay aligned. And that's okay. Sometimes love burns bright and leaves behind a beautiful scar, a reminder of who you were when you felt the most alive. Finn didn't regret it. How could he? He'd learned that loving someone doesn't always mean keeping them. It sometimes means letting them find their own path, even if it doesn't walk beside yours. Then there was the time he lost his arm. A wild, heartbreaking arc, tangled with destiny and echoes of himself he didn't understand yet. But before the pain and the prophecy came the doubt. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet, creeping kind. The kind that made him wonder if he was just pretending to be brave. He'd always leapt into battle without hesitation. But now he hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of thought. Was violence really the answer? Could there be a better way? These questions made him different. Less impulsive. More aware. He still fought, yes. Still saved kingdoms. Still charged headfirst into danger. But now he did it with purpose. With empathy. With the understanding that sometimes monsters weren't monsters. Sometimes they were just people who'd been hurting too long. It's funny how in childhood, the world feels so big and shiny. And then as you grow, it somehow gets smaller, but deeper. Finn began to see the history beneath the dirt, the layers beneath every kingdom. The old wars, the hidden truths, the buried mistakes that shaped everything. And in that discovery, he found new parts of himself. Parts that weren't loud or heroic. Parts that ached and wondered and dreamed. Parts that could sit in silence and still feel full. And through it all, Jake was there. Cracking jokes. Offering advice that was both ridiculous and profound. Being the steady hum in the background of Finn's ever-changing melody. Their brotherhood, more than any romance, was Finn's anchor. Because Jake knew all of him. The brave parts. The silly parts. The heartbroken, lost, dreaming, wondering, laughing parts. And he never asked Finn to be anything else. That kind of love? It's rare. It's real. And it shaped Finn more than any sword ever could. As we draw this segment to a close, think of Finn not just as a warrior or adventurer, but as a boy learning to feel, to love, to lose, to grow. These early days, the quests, the first loves, the stumbles, laid the foundation for the hero he'd become. But more importantly, they revealed the heart behind the hero. And in the end, isn't that the part that matters most? Finn's life was a series of bright sparks and long shadows, and in the quieter moments, between battles and banter, he began to understand something that many don't learn until much later. That love isn't just romance. It's not just first kisses or crushing heartbreaks or that giddy ache in your chest when someone special says your name. Love was Jake, stretching his arms into a hammock just to catch Finn when he fell. Love was Marceline, handing over her bass when words failed, because music said it better. Love was PB, showing up at the right moments. even if their love didn't unfold the way Finn dreamed. And love was himself, standing in front of a mirror, still figuring it all out, still showing up every day. There was a time, deep in the night, when Finn couldn't sleep. Jake was snoring softly nearby, the stars peeking through the treehouse canopy. Finn whispered, to no one in particular, "I just want to be good, like, well, really, truly good." That's what it came down to for him. Beneath the armor, the adventures, the laughter, and the awkward crushes, was a boy with a big heart and a fierce hope. A hope that he could be the kind of person who helped others feel safe, who made the world even a tiny bit better, who didn't just slay monsters, but also sat with them, understood them, and maybe even helped them change. But understanding yourself doesn't happen all at once. It sneaks up on you in strange little moments. Like helping Ice King write fan fiction because he's lonely. Or listening to a tree that's afraid to let go of its last leaf. Or realizing, mid-battle, that sometimes the scariest thing isn't the enemy. It's the version of yourself you haven't faced yet. Finn's journey through these early years wasn't about conquering evil or saving princesses. It was about becoming whole, bit by bit, day by day. He started to notice that some of his biggest growth happened during the moments when he wasn't trying to be heroic. Moments where he just was, helping a creature find its home, asking the right question instead of offering the right answer, choosing to stay quiet when the world expected him to roar. That's the funny thing about being young. You think the big defining moments will be loud, explosive, obvious. But they're often small, private, invisible to everyone but you. So many of Finn's adventures taught him that. Like when he discovered the pillow world, a strange dimension that he stumbled into, lived a whole life in, and then returned from, changed, older somehow, softer. He married, had kids, felt the slow warmth of a quiet life. And then he came back. Was it real? A dream? A metaphor? Does it matter? What mattered was how it made him feel. How it reminded him that life isn't just about epic quests. It's about the simple, fleeting moments that shape who you are when no one's watching. Looking back, those first loves, bubblegum, flame princess, they weren't failures. They were doorways. Each one opened something inside him. Curiosity, pain, joy, growth. They taught him that people are complex, feelings are messy, and love isn't always tidy or fair or reciprocated. But it's always worth it, because it shapes you, softens you, strengthens you, teaches you where your heart truly lives. And as Finn walked forward, older, a little taller, maybe a little quieter, he carried those lessons with him, not as burdens, but as seeds. Seeds of kindness, empathy, wisdom. He wouldn't always get it right. He'd make mistakes, fall short, doubt himself again and again. But he'd keep trying. Because that's who he is. Not just a hero. Not just a boy, but a human. And being human means loving even when it's scary. Choosing hope when it's easier to shut down. Showing up again and again, even when your heart's been broken. So as we leave this chapter behind, this tender time of adventure and first loves, let's take a breath. Let's remember that growing up isn't about becoming someone new. It's about becoming more of who you've always been. Braver, softer, wiser, like Finn. Still dreaming, still stumbling, still becoming. And isn't that a beautiful thing to fall asleep to? You still with me, sleepyhead? If your eyes are starting to flutter, that's okay. You don't need to hold on tight. This part of Finn's story is softer anyway. Not in how it feels, but in how it moves. This is where things start to shift. Not with fanfare, but with silence. Not with giant dragons or legendary quests, but with pauses and goodbyes, and the kind of lessons that don't come with a prize at the end. This is the part where Finn really starts to grow up. He used to think every problem could be solved with a sword, a punch, or a clever plan. But slowly, quietly, the problems changed. They got messier, blurry at the edges. They didn't always have villains. Sometimes the bad guy was someone hurting. Sometimes it was just a misunderstanding. And sometimes, most confusing of all, it was himself. Finn had to face moments where he didn't like who he was becoming. Moments where he let people down. Where his choices caused pain, even when he meant well. That's a tough pill for anyone to swallow. But especially for a boy who's always tried to do the right thing. One of the hardest chapters began when Fern entered his life. Fern, the grass clone, born from magic, confusion, and parts of Finn's own soul. At first, Fern felt like a reflection, another version of Finn, a twisted twin, one trying so desperately to be him. But things didn't go the way anyone hoped. Fern struggled with his identity. He wanted to be real, to be loved, to be accepted, not as a shadow, but as someone. And Finn, he didn't know how to love Fern the way he needed. It wasn't out of cruelty, just uncertainty. Because what do you do when you're faced with a version of yourself that you don't understand? Fern's spiral into loneliness, jealousy, and anger was tragic, and in the end, it hurt both of them. But here's the thing. Even when Fern turned on him, even when things got dark, Finn never truly hated him. Because deep down, he recognized that pain. He knew what it felt like to be lost inside your own skin, to wonder if you're enough. Then came the moment that left a quiet, permanent mark. The day Jake died. Not in a big dramatic blaze, not in some world-ending battle, but in a way that was strangely gentle, peaceful, final. Jake's passing wasn't just a loss, it was the end of an era. For so long, Jake had been Finn's constant, his brother, his guide, his anchor, and suddenly, he was gone. There's a special kind of heartbreak that comes when someone who knew all your versions, your silliest, weakest, bravest, messiest parts, leaves. Finn didn't cry in the loud, movie-style way. His grief showed up in small moments, pausing at the breakfast table, touching Jake's favorite mug, reaching for advice that wouldn't come. And in those quiet cracks, he changed. Not in an instant, but day by day he softened in places that had once been hard, grew stronger in ways that didn't show on the outside. He stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be present. Growing up doesn't always feel like growth. Sometimes it feels like loss, the loss of innocence, the loss of certainty. The loss of believing that everything can be fixed with a punch or a clever joke. But with those losses came something else. Depth, compassion. The kind of strength that doesn't always show up in battle, but in forgiveness, in patience, in just showing up when it's hard. Finn didn't stop being a hero. He just started being a different kind of one. Not the loudest. Not the flashiest, but maybe the most real. There's a quiet kind of courage that creeps in once the noise fades. After Jake's passing, Finn found himself sitting still more often, alone on rooftops, walking slowly through the forest, just listening to the wind, to the silence, to the world without his brother's steady hum beside him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It just was. And in that stillness, something happened that no amount of adventuring could have taught him. He started to become whole, not because he added more pieces, but because he finally began to sit with the broken ones. He visited old places that once brought joy, the Fire Kingdom, where echoes of his past love still flickered in the molten walls, the Candy Kingdom, now bustling with new changes where bubblegum had grown in her own quiet way. Even the Treehouse, still standing, though emptier now, felt different. Sometimes he'd wake from dreams of alternate lives, futures that could have been. He dreamed of being a father, of growing old, of what life might be like without magic, without battles, without the weight of being a hero. And he didn't fight those dreams. He let them come, let them leave something behind. They were reminders that the future wasn't set. That possibility still lived inside him, even when loss seemed to close all doors. One of the most tender things about this period of Finn's life was how often he stopped trying to be the center of everything. He let others lead. He sat back and watched more. He allowed himself to be a background character in other people's stories. Because growing up isn't always about stepping forward. Sometimes it's about stepping aside, making space, letting others bloom. There's a peace in that, a maturity that doesn't need the spotlight. Finn started to understand that love isn't about clinging. It's about witnessing, watching your friends change even if you don't quite fit into their new worlds, celebrating from afar, supporting without needing to be seen. He didn't always get it right, of course. There were still missteps, times when he lashed out, when he said the wrong thing, when the old version of himself tried to take the wheel again. But now, instead of pretending those moments didn't happen, he paused. He apologized, reflected, chose better the next time. That's the thing no one tells you about becoming an adult. It's not about knowing everything. It's about realizing how little you know, and learning anyway, bit by bit, with grace, with patience, with humility. There's one moment that always sticks with fans, a quiet scene, nothing flashy. Finn sits by a river. He picks up a rock, throws it in, watches the ripples. No dialogue, no explanation, just a boy and a river. But something about it feels like a chapter closing. It's the way his shoulders relax, the way he doesn't force a smile, the way he just is. Peaceful. That's what growing up gave Finn, not perfection, but peace. Not all the answers, but the ability to live with the questions. He still had his sword, still had strength, still had the spark that made him Finn the human. But more and more he learned that the bravest thing he could do wasn't to fight dragons or chase villains. It was to sit with his own feelings, to face himself, to open his heart after loss and keep it open even when it hurt. Because real heroes don't just save kingdoms. They heal, they listen, they grow. There was a moment not marked by danger or drama, but by something subtler. Finn stopped needing to be defined, not as a knight, not as the last human, not as anyone's ex-boyfriend, sidekick, or even savior. For the first time, he was just Finn, and that was enough. It didn't happen all at once. Growth rarely does. But one day he looked into a mirror, not searching for scars or old memories, but simply recognizing the face that stared back. A little older, a little quieter, still smiling, but in a softer way. It was the smile of someone who had known love and loss, who had been broken and still stood. Someone who understood that being a hero doesn't mean always winning. It means showing up, even when it's hard. In this chapter, Finn also began to revisit his roots, not just the literal places, but the emotional ones. He sought out Martin again, not to fight, not to demand answers, but to understand. Their dynamic was never easy. Martin was a drifting star, never anchored, never still. But Finn didn't come to change him anymore. He came with a quiet heart. He listened. He let go of the expectation that their story had to end perfectly. Sometimes healing doesn't come in a tidy resolution. Sometimes it's in the choice to stop needing closure, to find peace in the open ending. Finn never got the father he imagined, but he did become the kind of man he would have needed when he was younger, and in that, there was healing. The emotional weight of growing up became a quiet companion, not a burden. Finn carried it with a kind of grace, never boastful, never bitter. He began writing songs again. Not all of them were silly. Some were gentle. Some were raw. Melodies that captured the ache of letting go, the sweetness of remembering. The kind of feelings that settle into your bones and don't need to be spoken aloud. Music became a way to sort through the things he couldn't explain. Not for anyone else, just for himself. A boy once too restless to sit still, now found calm in quiet strums. And as he grew into this new self, the world around him began to look different too. He noticed things he used to race past. The way a dandelion wavered in the breeze, the patterns the clouds made, the tiny expressions on BMO's face when no one was looking. Adventure used to be explosions, danger, and dungeons. Now sometimes it was just sitting under a tree watching the wind move through the leaves, and knowing he didn't need to run anymore. Stillness became sacred. He reconnected with Flame Princess. This time without pressure, without the heat of past mistakes. Their conversations were gentler, more honest. They weren't trying to be who they were back then. They were simply meeting as who they are now, and that made all the difference. There was no need to rekindle anything, just a quiet understanding that love, even when it doesn't last, leaves warmth that never fully fades. He visited Marceline and Bubblegum more too. Watched them evolve, grow together. Finn wasn't central to their story anymore, and he didn't want to be. But he was part of it. And that was enough. They laughed over old memories, talked about fears, made tea at midnight. Not heroes on a quest. Just friends, resting in the comfort of being known. Even little moments with BMO, who never truly changed, became treasures. Late-night talks, shared meals. Playing make-believe just because it was fun. Finn no longer needed to prove he was grown up by leaving behind play. He'd learned that real maturity isn't about outgrowing wonder. It's about letting it live beside your wisdom. Being someone who can fight dragons and build forts. Who can carry grief and still laugh until their belly hurts. Finn had become that kind of person. And slowly, that deep ache inside him, that unspoken loneliness that had followed him for years, began to ease. Not disappear entirely, but soften, because he had chosen to stop running, to stop performing, to start being alone without being lonely, being quiet without being lost, being whole without needing to be everything to everyone. In the end, growing up wasn't a single event for Finn. It was a slow, winding path of heartbreaks and healing, of letting go and leaning in. And while many knew him as the great adventurer of Ooh, the bravest thing he ever did was become himself. Not the hero, not the legend, just Finn. Complicated, curious, compassionate, and still wide open to whatever tomorrow might bring. In the twilight of his youth, Finn began to embrace something he had never really understood before. He didn't need to be legendary to live a life that mattered. He didn't need songs sung about him in distant lands. He didn't need monuments or crowns. The real legacy he was building lived in far quieter places, in the lives he touched, in the kindnesses he offered, in the way he showed up even when he didn't know what to say. He started helping people in simple, quiet ways. Fixing broken fences, walking with the elderly banana guards, telling bedtime stories to young adventurers in training. And he didn't always tell them about his own past. Sometimes he just listened. Sometimes he let them be the heroes. Because growing up also meant knowing when to step aside and lift others up. He'd sit on the hill outside the treehouse, his boots off, the grass cool under his feet, and breathe in the evening air. The stars above Ooh twinkled with their usual mischief. The moon hung lazily in the sky. And for the first time in a long time, Finn wasn't looking up with longing. He wasn't wondering what wild quest might await him. He was content, right here, right now. He realized that he'd spent so much of his early life running toward meaning, chasing purpose, fearing that if he didn't do enough, he wouldn't be enough. But life had slowly whispered to him, "You are already enough, not because of your victories, not because of your scars, but because you keep going, you keep caring, you keep loving, even when it's hard." There's a small moment that fans sometimes forget, but it's one of the most human things Finn ever did. He planted a small garden, not magical, not enchanted, just soil, water, and seeds. He tended to it each day, not because it served a grand purpose, but because it made him feel alive, connected. Watching things grow slowly, with patience and care, mirrored something within him. It was the opposite of his early adventures. No rush, no monsters, no climactic victories. Just steady, honest work. And that little patch of earth became a symbol of everything he had learned. That growth takes time. That beauty often comes quietly. That peace isn't a destination. It's something you cultivate little by little, day by day. Finn still dreamed of adventure sometimes. In the quiet moments before sleep, his mind would wander to distant lands, ancient ruins, and oddball creatures. And maybe someday he'd pick up his sword again. Maybe he'd travel beyond the borders of Ooh, seeking out lost places and new friends. But for now, he didn't need to, because the greatest adventure, becoming himself, was still unfolding. One quiet morning at a time. In the end, Finn the human wasn't just a story of swords and monsters. It was a story of a boy who lost and loved and lived, who fell down and got back up, who changed and let others change. And through it all, he became a reflection of something truly rare, a hero who didn't chase glory, but who learned how to rest, how to forgive, how to grow. So as you're lying there, eyes soft and breath slow, think of Finn. Not in a blaze of battle, but sitting on his porch sipping tea, smiling softly at the horizon, still dreaming, still learning, still loving the world, just in a quieter way. Because growing up doesn't mean losing your wonder. It means holding it gently, like a flower you planted yourself, and letting it bloom. Let's sink even deeper now. We've followed Finn through treehouse mornings, heartbreaks, quiet growth, and the ordinary wonders of simply being human. But Ooh is a strange place, and Finn's journey? It isn't just personal. It's cosmic. Because hidden beneath the charm of colorful landscapes and silly voices lies a tangled web of lost ages, forgotten destinies, and mysteries that stretch back before time had names. Tonight we're peeling back that veil. So if your eyelids are growing heavy, that's okay. Let your thoughts float as we dive into the shadows behind the stars. Let's begin with the Catalyst Comet. Long before Finn held a sword, before his birth, or even the shaping of his bones, something ancient was already watching. Once every 1,000 years, a comet streaks across the skies of Ooh, not a regular one, a catalyst comet, a cosmic force carrying the potential to change the world, to shift it, shake it, even restart it entirely. And each time this comet comes, someone or something rises to meet it. Guess who was chosen this time? That's right, Finn. Or rather, the soul inside Finn. Because deep down, beneath the skin, the voice, and the goofy grin, Finn is something more than just a boy with a backpack. He's a reincarnated soul, one that's been around for a very long time. He's lived many lives, Fiona, Shoko, even a butterfly at one point. And now, this time, he was born as Finn Mertens, the last human of Ooh, or so he thought. The comet wasn't just a big, glowing rock in the sky. It was a test, a choice. When it finally arrived during Finn's teenage years, it didn't crash and burn. It spoke through the voice of an alien entity called the Catalyst Entity, a shimmering being of light and purpose who gently offered Finn a way out. "Come with me," it said. "Leave this world behind. Start fresh. Be reborn. You don't have to carry your pain." It wasn't threatening. It was calm, kind, almost parental. Finn could have said yes. He could have become energy again, skipping through time like a cosmic whisper. But he didn't. He chose to stay with Jake, with Ooh, with the people he loved. Not because he was afraid of death, but because he wasn't done living. Even with all the sorrow, confusion, and unanswered questions, he still believed there was something beautiful to hold on to. That moment, that choice, it says everything about who Finn truly is. He's more than destiny, more than prophecy, more than some celestial fragment on a long reincarnation chain. He's a boy who chooses love over escape. And yet, the secrets didn't stop there. There were deeper layers still. Beneath the grass of Ooh lie ruins, buried cities, cracked machines, holograms still flickering, whispering the names of forgotten kings. This is the age of humanity, long before candy kingdoms and talking dogs. A time when people like Finn ruled the earth, but they ruined it. War. Science pushed too far. Nuclear fallout, possibly even magic abuse. The Great Mushroom War, as it came to be known. Finn was born into the aftermath, never knowing the full truth. But every once in a while, he stumbled into old places, ancient bunkers and dusty libraries, where flickers of that truth whispered to him. Who was he, really? Was he part of the last human outpost? A child abandoned by parents who couldn't protect him? A survivor of a world that burned? The answers were never clear. But something in his heart told him. His life had begun long before he was ever found in the woods. And then, there was Martin Mertens, Finn's biological father. You'd think that might bring comfort, finally putting a name and face to the ache he'd carried for years. But Martin wasn't the noble figure Finn had dreamed of. No heroic backstory. No tearful reunion. Just a drifter. A selfish, space-faring man who saw life as something to take from, not give to. When Finn finally found him, it hurt. Deep. It was one of those turning points. Not loud, not violent, but personal. He'd built so much of his identity around the idea of one day knowing where he came from, why he was left behind. And when that answer finally arrived, it made less sense than the mystery ever had. Martin didn't want to stay. Didn't want to make amends. Didn't even see the weight of what he'd done. But strangely, that too was a gift. Because in that moment, Finn realized he wasn't shaped by his father's choices. He was shaped by his own. And that realization, that freedom, it let him stop chasing ghosts. It let him become his own man. There are other secrets, too. One's less about the past and more about the fabric of the universe itself. And let's talk about the multiverse. Yes, the multiverse exists in Adventure Time. Not just as a fun theory or throwaway idea, but as an actual structure. A real cosmic web of alternate realities. And at its heart sits a powerful, jellyfish-like entity known only as Prismo. Prismo isn't just a wishmaster. He's a being made of dreams. He exists in a timeless space between dimensions, surrounded by other gods, entities, and constructs. Finn meets Prismo not once but many times. Through death, through dreams, through sacrifice. And in these moments, the walls of reality thin. Finn glimpses himself in other lives, other choices, other timelines. In one world, he's an old man surrounded by family. In another, he's still chasing the comet. And in yet another, he never left the treehouse. Each version of him feels real. Each possibility, a path he could have walked. But instead of confusing him, these glimpses give Finn clarity. Because while the multiverse might be vast, and the future unknowable, the version he's living, it's his. And all this strange cosmic soup of lives and timelines, comes to a head in one of the most poetic arcs of the show, the Farm World universe. Remember that wish Finn made to Prismo when he wanted the Lich to have never existed? That wish created an entirely new reality. In it, Finn was never a hero, never had a sword, never fought monsters. Instead, he was a simple farm boy, living with his family in a cold, crumbling world. But that world wasn't safe. Without the Lich to balance the forces of destruction, new dangers emerged. And as Finn saw that world spiral, he realized something haunting. Even when you try to undo pain, you might create something worse. That's the heart of Finn's cosmic story. It isn't just about battles or comets or star gods. It's about acceptance, learning to live with imperfection, to face pain rather than erase it, to find meaning in the version of life you're in right now, even if it's not the one you imagine. And through it all, there was Jake. Always Jake. Finn's anchor through timelines and realities. Whether he was falling from the sky or trapped in a dream realm, Jake was the constant. A talking dog, sure. But also a soulmate, a brother. A reflection of Finn's own balance between chaos and calm. And the truth is, Jake wasn't just a sidekick. He was part of Finn's soul. Literally. In some mysterious, magical way, they were tied together beyond logic. Jake once said something that stuck. Dude, maybe we're just part of the same soup. And that line, strange as it sounds, might be the most spiritually profound thing in the whole show. Because maybe we all are. Maybe all of us, sleepyheads included, are little pieces of a much bigger dream. And Finn, he just happens to be one of the few lucky enough to peek behind the curtain. That brings us to a quiet truth. As much as Finn searched for answers, what he found was something softer and sadder. That not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be sat with, to be carried like a melody you hum before sleep, never fully understanding but still feeling it in your chest. Now, there's one more name we can't ignore. Golb, a being older than time. Not evil in the traditional sense, but chaos incarnate. The ultimate cosmic entropy. A force that breaks down structure, undoes meaning, erases being. Wherever Golb appears, order falls apart. And it's in this strange final arc of Finn's journey that he comes face to face with it. Not with the sword raised, not shouting battle cries, but with music. Isn't that something? After all the wars and questions and heartbreaks, Finn faces the end of all things with a song. He and his friends, Bubblegum, Ice King, or rather Simon, and the reborn Betty end up in Golb's chaotic realm. There's no fighting Golb. Not in the way Finn's used to. Because how do you fight a concept? This wasn't about strength. It was about grace. Betty, in her final act of love, merges with Golb to save Simon. She gives herself over to that force of undoing, asking only that it protect the man she once loved. And in that moment, something incredible happens. Golb listens. Just a little. It doesn't become good. It doesn't become gentle. But it changes. Maybe not because it wanted to, but because someone believed it could. And Finn? He doesn't stop the apocalypse. He simply survives it, and then helps build what comes next. This isn't your typical hero story. There's no final victory lap, no throne, no big speech. Instead, there's something more honest, a world that still turns, a boy who's not really a boy anymore, and the understanding that even cosmic truths can't always be held in your hands. But that doesn't make them any less real. Let's take a breath here and think about how far Finn's come. From chasing girls to challenging gods. From slamming swords to singing lullabies in the void. And yet through it all, the thing that never changed was his heart. He still cried when he lost things. He still laughed when Jake made a fart joke. He still got scared. He still reached out for connection, even when the universe seemed indifferent. Finn remained human. That's what made him powerful. Not his fighting, not his bravery, but his refusal to become numb. Even when things got too big, too strange, too cosmic, he stayed soft. He stayed open. That brings us to a strange little metaphor, one that pops up quietly in Adventure Time's final season. A simple, blinking green light. You might remember it. BMO, years in the future, is floating through space, telling stories to no one. The world he knew is long gone. Everyone, dust. But there's a light, a green light, blinking in the void. And BMO says softly, almost to himself, everything small is just a small version of something big. I'm just a little living boy in a big universe. That line could have been Finn's, too. It captures something so tender and true, that even when we don't understand everything, even when the universe feels too vast or uncaring, we still matter. Because we love, because we try, because we exist. Finn never got all the answers, never found the perfect life, never beat the game. But maybe he wasn't supposed to. Maybe the lesson wasn't how to win. Maybe it was how to stay curious, how to stay present, as the questions kept changing. And if that's not the most beautifully relatable thing for us, sleepyheads at the end of a long day, I don't know what is. So as this segment drifts to its close, let yourself breathe. Let your thoughts float like stardust. You don't need to solve the cosmos tonight. You don't need to understand every part of your past. You're here, and that's enough. Finn the human didn't need to save everything. He just needed to be. And so do you. Now, as the echoes of cosmic chaos begin to settle, we're left with a quieter, stranger kind of clarity. Finn isn't the same kid who leapt out of his treehouse shouting, "Mathematical!" He's not chasing princesses or flailing through the fire kingdom. He's someone who's been to the edge of meaning and returned, not as a champion, but as a witness. A witness to how big and confusing and strangely beautiful everything is. And what did he bring back? Not a sword, not a trophy, but something softer. Wisdom, maybe. But not the kind you read in a book. The kind you feel when you stare up at the stars, heart thumping quietly, and think, I don't get it, but that's okay. I'm still here. There's something profoundly comforting in that. Adventure Time never told us we'd figure it all out. Never promised neat conclusions. Even Finn's past, his parents, his destiny, his purpose, was a puzzle with missing pieces. And yet, he kept going. He found joy in not knowing. He laughed in the face of the absurd. He turned heartbreak into campfire songs. He mourned without turning cold, even when he found out that his mother was a survivalist AI. Even when he realized his father was a space criminal who abandoned him. Even when his world was a post-apocalyptic echo of something long gone. He still chose kindness. He still chose connection. And isn't that kind of resistance powerful? The truth is, most of us won't face ancient deities or dance through multiverses. But we do wake up with unanswered questions. We do lose people. We do walk through the seasons of life that feel like riddles written by the universe itself. Finn reminds us that it's okay to not solve the riddle. That sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is show up. To love something fragile. To let yourself cry and then still say yes to another day. And here's something else. When we say cosmic secrets, it's easy to think of stars and timelines and beings beyond time. But maybe the real secret, wasn't out there. Maybe it was within Finn the whole time. His empathy, his perseverance, his ability to forgive even when he didn't understand why things happened the way they did. Like when he forgave Simon, the Ice King, for all the terrible things that happened while under the Crown's influence. Or when he comforted Fern, his plant clone, a version of himself gone wrong, and held him as he crumbled, whispering that everything was okay. That takes courage. Not just sword-swinging courage, but emotional courage, soul courage. And as we glide toward the end of this segment, let's return to a moment that really encapsulates it all. It's the final episode. The battle is over. The world has changed. And Finn? He's floating down a river, strumming a song with Jake by his side. There's no epic speech, no final prophecy. Just two brothers watching the sky change colors. The lyrics go something like this. Time is an illusion that helps things make sense. So we're always living in the present tense. It doesn't seem dangerous. And so I find it strange that there's nothing ever truly making up our minds. And yet, we keep moving forward anyway. That's it. That's the secret. We don't need the whole map. We just need to keep stepping. So, my sleepy traveler, as you lie back and let your mind drift, think of Finn, not as a warrior or a legend, but as a boy who kept walking even when the road turned upside down. Think of the cosmic secrets not as puzzles to be solved, but as lullabies whispered from a universe too big for any one story. And remember, you don't need all the answers. You just need to stay soft. Stay curious. Stay you. Let the stars hum. Let the past ripple like gentle waves behind your eyes. You're not lost. You're just wandering. And there's something beautiful about that. We've arrived at the closing arc of Finn's journey. The battles that come here aren't just against monsters or villains. They're battles against loss, against letting go, against the fear of growing up and moving on. This part of Finn's story is slower, quieter, but no less powerful. If anything, it's where the realest truths begin to surface. So fluff that pillow, slow your breath, and let's step together into the final stretch of Finn the human. When we last left Finn, he had unearthed the great cosmic riddles of the universe. He'd faced his father. He'd seen into the multiverse. He had faced clones, dream versions of himself, even the uncomfortable idea that his own goodness wasn't always enough. But now, as the world of Ooh shifts around him, he faces something even more difficult. Ending. Let's talk about Gumbaldia, the looming war between Princess Bubblegum and her mutated uncle, a reflection of her own choices of the life she built from candy, control, and science. Finn, no longer the boy who leaps into danger for fun, tries to prevent the war. He seeks diplomacy, tries to talk everyone down. He builds peace through conversations, not combat. It's subtle, but huge. Finn doesn't want to win. He wants everyone to be okay. Can you feel that shift? From warrior to mediator. From sword-swinging boy to heart-led peacekeeper. And still, it doesn't work. The war begins anyway. Bubblegum and Gumball's armies collide in a surreal battlefield, one that somehow feels like a dream and a nightmare all at once. There are explosions of jelly, candy limbs flying. Jake grows into a skyscraper. Magic swirls around the sky like storm clouds from another dimension. And in the middle of it all, Finn. Small, tired, but still fighting, not to destroy, but to heal. And then, the nightmare becomes real. Gulb arrives. Not a villain you can punch. Not a monster with a face. Gulb is entropy itself. The unraveling of existence. The chaos that lives beneath everything. He doesn't speak. He doesn't gloat. He just consumes. And this is where Finn's journey turns inward again. Because how do you fight something like Gulb? You don't. You feel. Finn, with Simon, Betty, and even a strange eldritch choir of cosmic notes, attempts to contain the destruction, not with weapons, but with harmony. Yes, literally, with music. It's a lullaby. Soft. Uncertain. Real. It doesn't fix everything, but it reaches something. It reminds us, right in the heart of the finale, that connection matters more than control. That art, emotion, and vulnerability might just hold more power than force ever could. And then Betty, dear, complicated Betty, makes the ultimate sacrifice. She uses magic to fuse herself with Gulb, becoming a force of change just to protect Simon. Her love, wild and irrational, becomes the thing that bends the cosmos itself. It's messy, beautiful, bittersweet. Finn watches it all, not as a hero standing triumphant, but as someone who has finally learned that some endings can't be rewritten, only witnessed. And after the storm? After the chaos calms? What remained? Finn. Alive. Changed. And okay. That's the strange beauty of this last arc. It doesn't end in glory. There's no throne, no final battle cry. There's just peace. Not a peace that was won through conquest, but a peace that grew from letting go. So the battle is over. Galb is gone. Betty is somewhere else now. Maybe everywhere. Maybe nowhere. And Simon is no longer the Ice King. The weight of it all hangs in the air like fog after a long, strange dream. Ooh is quiet, scarred, but not broken. And Finn? Finn walks through this new world not as a savior, but as someone who understands its fragility. In the days following the chaos, there's no fanfare, no parade, no chosen one moment. Finn goes home, back to the treehouse, back to the cozy clutter of his life, books half read, dishes in the sink, drawings tacked to the wall. Everything familiar, but different. There's an ache now in Finn's heart that didn't exist before. Not just from the war, but from the slow realization that some people don't come back. That some questions never get answered. That even in a world of magic and talking clouds and candy kingdoms, life is still full of quiet, permanent goodbyes. Jake sees it. Of course he does. He's always seen Finn, really seen him. So one day, as the sun filters through the leaves, Jake floats beside Finn, their feet dangling over the balcony. They don't talk much. Not about Galb. Not about the cosmic unraveling of reality. Not about the people they lost. Just, "How are you feeling, dude?" Jake asks, eyes soft. Finn pauses, then says, "Like I'm still here." And Jake smiles. That's more than enough. These final moments between Finn and Jake, they're not flashy. They're not made to impress. But they matter so deeply. Because they remind us of something easy to forget in a show filled with monsters and mayhem. The real adventure was the friendship. The time spent side by side. The mornings with pancakes. The nights with lullabies and silly jokes. The love between two brothers, not by blood, but by choice. That's the core of it all. And it's what makes the next step even harder. Because even that love has to change. We begin to feel it, subtly at first. Jake is fading. He's mellow, more philosophical than usual. He talks about reincarnation, about what it means to really be. He hugs Finn a little longer. He stares at the stars a little more often. And eventually, the day comes. Jake is gone. Not in a tragic way. Not with screaming or chaos. Just gone. For Finn, it's a moment that breaks him and heals him. Because Jake's departure isn't a punishment. It's a continuation. A reminder that every soul moves on in its own time. And while it hurts, while it aches in a way words can't fully touch, it also makes room. Room for growth. For reflection. For life. Finn learns to live with that loss. To carry Jake in stories, in laughter, in the way he approaches the world. It's grief. But it's also grace. He keeps going. And that's the beautiful part. Finn doesn't vanish after Jake leaves. He doesn't retreat into silence or try to recreate the past. He moves forward. He makes new friends. Explores new lands. Continues to ask questions, not because he's searching for control, but because he's curious. Open. Alive. And bit by bit, Ooh heals too. There's something powerful in seeing a hero settle into quietness. To watch Finn fold laundry, cook soup, sit beside a river, and just be. It tells us that even after world-ending battles, even after magic and gods and fate, there's still joy in smallness. In ordinary days, in new beginnings. Finn doesn't stop being a hero. He just becomes a different kind, a gentle one. And in one of the final images of his adult life, we see him, older, wiser, hair grown out again, with a small smile on his face. Still wandering, still wondering, still walking through the world with an open heart. There's no end card, no final line of dialogue that says this is it, because it isn't. Finn's story never really ends. It just becomes a part of the land, part of the lore, part of us. As time moves on, the world doesn't wait, but Finn doesn't need it to. He begins spending more time with himself. At first, that silence was deafening, but over time it becomes a kind of music. The wind rustling through the branches, the crackle of a campfire, the quiet creaks of the treehouse settling at night. He journals, he sketches, he walks, and somewhere along the way he realizes that Jake's gone in body but never in spirit. Jake's words, his silly faces, his thoughtful pauses before saying something deeply weird but always wise, live in Finn's memory. And sometimes when the moonlight hits just right and the air feels a little thicker with meaning, Finn swears he hears Jake's laugh echo on the breeze, just for a second. It's during this quiet period that Finn reconnects with people he'd grown distant from. He visits Princess Bubblegum. They don't talk about the past right away. They sit under a tree and share tea, talk science, talk stories, talk nonsense. Eventually, they do speak of the old days. "I used to think you'd always be a kid," Bubblegum says, stirring her tea slowly. Finn chuckles. "Me too. Sometimes I still feel like one." "You've grown, Finn, more than anyone I know." He doesn't respond. He just smiles. Because he knows it's true. He visits Marceline, too. They jam together, just like they used to. Only this time, the music feels different. Softer, less fight the power, more feel the breeze. Marcy writes a song about Jake. Finn doesn't say much. He just listens, eyes closed, letting her voice carry the memories back like a tide. Even BMO, ever cheerful, now holds a new depth of understanding. One night, Finn catches BMO sitting on the porch alone, looking at the stars. "Do you miss him?" Finn asks. BMO doesn't look away from the sky. "Miss who?" "Jake." "Oh," BMO says, a small smile for me. "I don't miss him, because I still play with him all the time. In my heart." Finn laughs, caught off guard by the sheer honesty. "You're the wisest robot I know." BMO just shrugs. "Maybe you just needed to remember." There's something else that starts to blossom during these years. A sense of purpose. Not heroic in the traditional sense. There are no kingdoms to save. No prophecies to fulfill. But Finn begins helping people. Just showing up. A village needs help rebuilding. He's there. A kid gets lost in the forest. He'll walk them home, tell stories along the way. A sentient rock wants to learn how to dance. Finn's got 2 left feet, but he gives it a shot anyway. It's not about glory anymore. It's about presence, compassion, care. Finn becomes a kind of quiet guardian. Not feared, not worshipped, just trusted. One day, while walking the coastline, Finn meets a creature who doesn't speak, at least not in words. It communicates through shimmering lights, pulses of color, and a warm hum. Finn doesn't understand it, not logically, but something in his heart knows. He sits with it for hours, not needing to speak, just feeling. And for the first time since Jake left, Finn cries. Not from sadness, but from release. It's like something inside finally exhaled. All the battles, all the heartbreak, all the confusion and pain, it flows out in gentle tears, and when it's done, he feels lighter, like the world has shifted a little, just enough to make walking easier. That's the thing about endings. They aren't always about stopping. Sometimes they're about softening. The final battle, as grand as it was, wasn't really the end. The real journey, the quiet path of letting go, of healing, of rediscovering joy and stillness, that came after. And it's just as important. Because Finn's story reminds us that being a hero isn't just about fighting monsters. It's about staying open after the fighting is done. It's about grieving without shutting down. About loving deeply even when loss feels inevitable. And most of all, it's about showing up. For yourself. For your people. For the world. Years pass, not all at once, but quietly, like sand slipping through fingers. Finn's face grows longer, his limbs stretch a bit more, and there's a new stillness in his eyes. Not sadness, but a calm kind of knowing, the kind that only comes from living through things. Sometimes people ask him if he misses the old days, the battles, the quests, the thrill of it all. And Finn always answers with the same small smile. Sometimes, but mostly, I'm just glad it happened. Because those days built him, shaped him, gave him everything. Pain, joy, love, loss, and purpose. But they weren't meant to last forever. Nothing is, not even heroism. And that's okay. One afternoon, Finn finds himself back at the very edge of the Candy Kingdom. The same place where years ago he used to leap into danger without a second thought. This time, he just stands there, watching life unfold. A young adventurer races past him, sword in hand, laughing. There's something familiar in that energy, wild, curious, a little reckless. Finn smiles. He doesn't chase after them. He doesn't need to. He knows the world is in good hands, not just because of heroes like that kid, but because everyone holds a piece of the magic now. A lesson they learned, a friend they made, a heart they chose to protect. The ripple of his actions spreads quietly, invisibly, like roots under the surface. One day he returns to the treehouse. Not to live there again, but to visit, to remember. He finds the old drawings on the walls. A note from Jake, crumpled and faded, but still intact. A recording BMO left behind, singing a silly lullaby. And he sits in that old wooden chair looking out over the hills and just breathes. He thinks about everything. The first time he saw Princess Bubblegum. The countless adventures with Jake, both ridiculous and heart-wrenching. The time he met his dad. The time he let him go. The way it felt to cry for Simon. The way it felt to lose Jake and survive anyway. He thinks about what it means to grow up, really grow up. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. To carry scars and still choose softness. To lose everything and still love again. To be afraid and walk forward anyway. Eventually, Finn builds a little home by a quiet river. It's nothing fancy. Just a cabin made of soft wood and warm colors, but it's his. There are wind chimes, a tiny garden, a hammock where he stares up at the stars and lets his thoughts wander. Sometimes Marceline visits and plays songs by the fire. Sometimes PB brings a new invention and nerds out about it while Finn nods, pretending to understand. Sometimes BMO shows up and tells ghost stories that are really just weird dreams. And sometimes, when the night is very still, he dreams of Jake. They're walking together, no destination, just walking. And it feels so real. Jake turns to him and says, "You're doing good, buddy. Real good." Finn smiles in his sleep. One day, a young creature, some weird mix between a lizard, a marshmallow, and maybe a toaster, shows up at his door. "Are you the great Finn the human?" the kid asks, eyes wide. Finn laughs. "I'm just Finn." "But you're the one from the stories." Finn sits down beside the kid. "Want to hear the real version?" And just like that, he begins. Not with drama or fanfare, not with a sword or an explosion, but with warmth and a story. Because that's what Finn has become in the end. Not just a warrior or a legend, but a storyteller, a keeper of moments, a bridge between the wild past and the hopeful future. A boy who became a man, not through violence, but through growth, grief, and grace. And maybe that's the truest kind of hero there is. Not someone who slays dragon, but someone who remembers, who forgives, who rests, who learns, who loves, who lets go. And so as the sun sets over the land of Oo once more, we close this chapter of Finn's journey. Not with a bang, but with a hush, a final exhale, a soft, peaceful smile. Because after everything, every war, every wound, every wonder, Finn the human has found something rare and precious. He's found peace. Let's take one more deep breath together. In through the nose and out through the heart. We're entering the final stretch of Finn's story tonight. Not the end exactly, but the gentle afterglow. The soft haze that settles once the music fades and the stars start to blink in. This is where legacy lives. Not in trophies, not in monuments, but in echoes. Let's listen closely to what Finn left behind. The land of Oo remembers its heroes in strange and beautiful ways. Not with bronze statues or dusty plaques, but with shared stories, campfire tales, whispers passed from one creature to another, drawings on cave walls, little kids acting out battles with sticks and laughter. And Finn? He's become part of the fabric. Not larger than life, not some untouchable god figure, but something more meaningful, human. The kind of legend who wasn't perfect, who made mistakes, who felt everything deeply, and still kept going. Across the Candy Kingdom, there's a mural painted in a quiet alley. One most tourists never find. It's simple. A boy and his dog standing on a hill at sunset, overlooking 1,000 adventures left behind them. Nobody knows who painted it. But every now and then someone stops and stares. A kid with a bandaged knee, a parent carrying groceries, a lonely robot searching for meaning. And they all feel something they can't quite name. A flicker. A memory they've never lived. A warmth like laughter shared long ago. That's legacy too. In the forest beyond the Fire Kingdom, there's a treehouse. Not the treehouse, but a new one. Built by someone who heard the old tales and wanted to start something fresh. It's smaller, humbler, but full of life. Maps pinned to the walls. Notes scribbled in the margins of books. A sword carved from driftwood. More symbolic than sharp. And hanging above the door, a hand-drawn sign. It says simply, "Do good. Have fun." Whoever built it doesn't claim to be the next Finn. They're just inspired by the spirit of him. That's the thing about legacy. It's not about recreating someone's steps. It's about walking forward in your own way, because of the light they left behind. Elsewhere in Oo, a school for young adventurers thrives. It's not what you'd expect. There are no harsh drills or hero quotas. Instead, it's a place to learn how to be brave and kind, how to ask questions, how to hold a sword in a storybook, how to lead, but also how to listen. At the heart of its teachings, a small journal, old, leather-bound, filled with sketches and thoughts. Finn's journal. He donated it anonymously. Didn't want the attention. He just thought it might help, and it does. Inside are not just tales of dragons and ghosts, but pages where Finn reflects on heartbreak, on anger, on what it means to say sorry, to be wrong, to start over. Lessons that last longer than any monster you could ever slay. And then there's the music. Marceline once released an album called For Jake and Finn. It's raw, quiet, mostly acoustic. Half the songs are just humming, wind chimes, a creaky rocking chair. But somehow, listening to it, you feel held. One track is a simple lullaby. It goes, "Heroes fade, but hearts remain. In quiet nights, they call our name. If you remember, then they live. And what they were, they still can give." That's what Finn became. Not just a name, but a feeling. Let's pause here, just for a moment. Can you feel it? That warmth in your chest, that flicker behind your eyelids. That's legacy, too. The quiet presence of a life well lived. Not blaring, not boastful, but gentle, persistent, true. There's much more to explore. How the people Finn touched live on, how the land continues to evolve, and what all of this means for the future. But for now, rest in this thought. That even the softest footprints can shape the world. That kindness echoes. And that somewhere in Uhu, or maybe in your own heart, Finn the human is still smiling. Some say legacy is about what you leave behind. But in the land of Uhu, it's more like what you pass forward. Take Fern, for example. He was once a twisted reflection, born from the grass sword's curse, carrying all of Finn's pain and confusion. At first, Fern was rage. He lashed out, trying to claim the identity he thought he lost. He didn't understand what he was or why he was. But even in the face of that, Finn didn't hate him. He reached out, offered compassion. And in the end, it was that compassion, not battle, that brought peace. Fern found rest, redemption. And from the place where his form once stood, a new tree grew, tall and green and golden, its leaves whispering when the wind passes through. People say if you sit beneath that tree and stay quiet long enough, you'll hear a voice say, "It's okay to not know who you are yet." That's legacy. Not just fixing what's broken, but helping others heal, even when they look like the parts of yourself you once feared. In the rebuilt glass kingdom, a young ruler wears a pendant shaped like a tiny sword. It's not for battle. It's a symbol of protection and hope. Finn once helped her see that strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about being transparent, honest, willing to admit when you're scared. She teaches that lesson now to every child who comes through the palace gates. One of her favorite sayings? Even a hero gets hurt sometimes, but they stand back up, not alone but with help. That's the truth Finn modeled again and again. Not the lone wolf, not the flawless savior, but a boy who leaned on others, grew through mistakes, and learned to love himself not for his victories, but for his heart. And BMO? Oh, sweet BMO. They carry on Finn and Jake's legacy in the most BMO way possible, telling half-true bedtime stories to passing travelers and neighborhood raccoons. Some of them are completely nonsensical. Others are surprisingly deep. But in every tale, there's a shimmer of Finn, his goofiness, his bravery, his tenderness. Once upon a time, BMO said, there was a human boy with a big hat and a bigger soul. He wanted to fight evil, but what he really did was teach everyone how to care. And then BMO usually falls asleep mid-story. But that's part of the charm. Somewhere in a hidden canyon, tucked between ancient stones and singing moss, is a place called Whisper Point. It's a tiny sanctuary, no signs, no paths, just a little wooden bench overlooking a stream. Nobody's really sure who built it. But carved into the bench's surface are words that never fade. Be kind to yourself, the journey is long. Every so often, someone finds it. A traveler, a wanderer, a creature looking for something they can't name. And they sit and listen to the water and feel, okay, not fixed, not healed. Just okay. That too is Finn's legacy. Creating spaces, physical and emotional, where people can just be. Princess Bubblegum, in her later years, often reflects on the young boy who once ran screaming into her castle to rescue her from imaginary threats. At first, she saw him as a nuisance, then an ally, then a complicated tangle of love and friendship, and finally a reminder that science doesn't hold every answer. That sometimes you need a little chaos, a little faith, a heart willing to leap before it knows how to land. She's told others that she owes Finn more than anyone realizes. He changed her, not by challenging her authority, but by quietly modeling a different kind of strength, one rooted in vulnerability, in listening and caring first, and questioning later. Now her policies are softer, more inclusive, more human. That's the ripple of a life like Finn's. And what about Jake? Though he's gone from the physical world, his bond with Finn left an imprint deeper than time. There are rumors, just whispers really, that sometimes when the stars align just right, a golden shimmer floats beside Finn's river cabin. It doesn't speak. It doesn't move. But it's felt. A presence, a warmth, a sense of someone wagging their tail just out of view. Jake's legacy is entwined with Finn's, not as separate threads, but as one long braided path that loops and twists and always comes back to love. Finn often looks out over the water and says, "You're still here, dude." And somehow, Jake is. So here we are, in the wake of grand adventures and quiet years, in the space between myth and memory. Finn the human didn't change the world with a final battle. He changed it with a lifetime of choices. To be kind when it was hard. To grow even when it hurt. To forgive when he had every reason not to. His legacy isn't in what he did, but in what he left behind. A better world. A softer world. A world where it's okay to feel deeply and to keep going anyway. There's something special about quiet legacies. They don't shout. They don't demand attention. They hum like an old song you forgot you remembered. And in the land of ooh, that hum carries on in unexpected corners. Like in the Candy Kingdom schoolhouse, where a little cinnamon bun kid named Callie stands up to bullies, not with fists, but with a goofy poem and a proud little smile. She says she wrote it because the human hero from the stories once wrote poems too, even if he wasn't very good at it. And everyone laughs, not at her, but with her. And just like that, a tiny ripple of courage is passed on. In a forest beyond the Fire Kingdom, there's a traveling bard named Fig. He sings tales of the old days, of heroes and monsters and strange lands. But the story that gets the most requests is always the same. The boy and his dog. He strums his lute gently and sings not of battles, but of breakfast, not of conquest, but of conversations under moonlight, not of glory, but of a friendship that bent the stars. Sometimes listeners cry, sometimes they smile, but always they leave with something warm glowing in their chest. That's legacy, too. Not in being remembered exactly right, but in how you made people feel. And then there's the new adventures. They're not as famous, not yet. But every now and then a group of them will gather around a campfire swapping stories. A blue-skinned archer, a flame elemental in training, a former villain trying hard to be good. And one of them will always say, remember that time Finn the human. And then they'll tell a tale, half true, half exaggerated, about a boy with a big heart and wild hair, who saved a kingdom, or made pancakes with a vampire queen, or sang lullabies to a giant worm. They don't always agree on the details, but they all agree on one thing. He always tried to do the right thing. And that trying, that effort, it became the blueprint for everyone who came after. There's a little museum in the Ice Kingdom now. It used to be a ruin, half-melted towers and cracked floors. But over time, someone restored it bit by bit. Not as a monument to Ice King or Simon or Betty, but to memories. In the corner of one room behind frosted glass is a simple, worn green backpack. There's a sign beside it that reads, Finn the Human's Pack, contents unknown. But we imagine hope, loyalty, and a half-eaten sandwich. Visitors leave notes beside it. Tiny folded papers that say things like, I stood up to my fear today. I forgave someone who hurt me. I still miss my best friend. They don't know if Finn will ever read them, but writing them feels like enough. Because that's what Finn's presence did, made people feel brave enough to be honest. Even the sky seems to remember him. In the rare moments when ooh grows still, when the clouds move just so, when the birds stop chirping for a breath, there's a softness in the air. Like the world is remembering. Not just the boy who fought monsters, but the boy who danced in the rain, who hugged his dog tight, who laughed until he hiccuped, who cried and healed and cried again. Who doesn't forget that kind of spirit? It folds it into the soil, the stars, the lullabies, passed from tree folk to candy children to distant aliens. And somewhere in a cabin by the river, there's still an old sword on the mantel. Not polished, not for show. Just resting. The cabin is simple, quiet, filled with sketches of old adventures, drawings of Jake, scribbles from BMO, and notes that say things like, be patient, go outside more, love wins. Sometimes when the wind blows just right, the cabin door creaks open and a leaf skitters across the floor. And if you sit very still, you might hear a kettle boil, a chair creak, footsteps, a laugh. Like someone's still there. Maybe he is. Or maybe his legacy is just that alive. Sometimes the most powerful stories end not with a bang, but with a sigh. Not with a giant boss fight or a shouted farewell, but with a sunset. And that's exactly how Finn's story feels in the end. Like watching the last golden light slip over the horizon, soft and warm, without needing anything more. There's no statue of him in the Candy Kingdom, no book of laws bearing his name, no giant mural stretched across the sky. But there are gardens planted by people he inspired, songs hummed by children who never met him, moments of quiet bravery that ripple outward like when a scared gumball guardian chooses kindness instead of control, or when a water nymph leaves her hidden grotto to help a lost child find their way. None of those moments shout, Finn was here, but they don't need to. Because his legacy isn't carved in stone. It's etched in people, in their hearts, in the choices they make when no one's watching. You know, there's this old phrase from Earth, plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. That's Finn. He didn't always have a plan. He didn't always know where he was going. He stumbled, messed up, lost people, grew, and tried again. But he planted things. Seeds of courage, of silliness, of belief in second chances. And now Ooh is full of shade from those trees, even if most folks don't know who planted them. BMO still plays music late at night sometimes. Quiet little tunes that barely echo through the house. Songs with no lyrics, just feeling. Hope, melancholy, love. And if you're lucky enough to visit and sit quietly, BMO might turn and say, "Do you remember Finn? He was my best friend." And if you nod, BMO will smile. That's enough. That remembering. Maybe one day, far in the future, some curious soul will dig through the sands of time and find a tiny trinket. An old sword handle, a worn-out hat, a doodle of a dog and a boy hugging under stars. And maybe they'll wonder, who was this? What story lived here? And maybe, just maybe, they'll feel it. That whisper of a boy who loved loud, lived big, and never stopped trying. And in that moment, he'll live again. Because stories like Finn's, they don't really end. They just fall asleep for a little while. So as we close the chapter on Finn the human tonight, take a slow breath in and a softer one out. And think about the ways you leave your own quiet legacy. In the friends you laugh with. In the strangers you help. In the kindnesses no one sees but you choose anyway. We are all walking our own adventure. Not with swords or quests maybe, but with heart, with love, with the courage to keep going even when it's hard. Hey, you did good today. Just by being here, just by listening, just by resting. You're part of a story too, and the world is better with you in it. Thank you for spending this time with me. From the treehouse to the stars, from sword fights to lullabies. This was the journey of Finn the human, and it was an honor to wander through it with you. Good night, sleepyhead. Dream gentle dreams. And may your own legacy be soft and wide and full of wonder.